Welcome after our first technical difficulty evening. My name is David Boeren and I'm an events producer here at Studium Generale at our university. For those who don't know us, we organize a broad range of public events for students and other interested parties to broaden horizons. Before we start with this event, I would like to go over some house rules. First, I want to stress that racist, sexist, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, homophobic, or any other discriminatory comments, as well as any personal attacks instead of substantive discussion tonight, will not be tolerated. Secondly, we will talk about some serious topics, especially with everything that's going on in the world today. I can imagine that these topics can elicit strong emotions from you, and we encourage critical debate here at Studium Generale, but we urge you to keep any comments or questions you have for our guests until the end of the lecture, because we have ample time for discussion and Q&A. Then, without further ado, I would like to introduce the person who will lead us this afternoon. He is a professor of international relations at our very own Erasmus School of Social and Behavioral Sciences, and is currently researching military AI from a European governance perspective. Please welcome on stage Dr. Michal Underko.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here today. When we started talking with David about organizing this event, which was about September last year, we thought it's going to be an exotic topic, and we actually debated whether we should book actually a smaller room, because it would then look better than having an empty room here. In the meantime, it became a really front-page news, and so I'm very glad to see so many of you here today. We have two fantastic guests with us today who are going to talk about AI, arms race, and what it means for the future of security. And these two guests are going to give us really the cutting edge of both the policy and the academic thinking on this topic. Our main speaker today is going to be David van Weel. David is Assistant Secretary General of NATO for Innovation, Hybrid, and Cyber. And in this capacity, David advises the Secretary General on maintaining NATO's innovative edge and addressing technological challenges. Before that, David was a private secretary to the Dutch Minister of Defense. He was the policy director at the Dutch Ministry of Defense, and he was advising the Dutch Prime Minister on issues of foreign and security policy. And before that, he graduated from Naval Academy, and he is actually born and raised in Rotterdam, so it's a little bit of a coming back to home for him. David is going to speak for about 30 to 40 minutes, and afterwards we're going to introduce Professor Marijn Hoytink, who is a professor of research professor at Antwerp University, who received her PhD from the University of Amsterdam, but we already agreed we're going to forgive her that. And she's an expert on military technology, especially on emerging tech and artificial intelligence. She has received more grants than I can ever, enumerate. I have actually a two-page list. And she's currently leading a research network funded by the Flemish Science Foundation on technology and warfare. Marijn is going to speak for about 15 to 20 minutes, giving us a little bit of a feedback on what David had told us by then, and also sort of putting it in a little bit of a broader context. Afterwards, we're going to open the floor for a discussion, and we hope to have a fruitful and respectful discussion, and we hope to have enough time to address questions that will come from the audience. Thank you very much for being here. And now I'm giving the floor to David van Weel. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Michael, and it's a great pleasure to be here. And yes, it did help that the venue was Rotterdam for me to come over from Brussels and speak to you here. I'm the Assistant Secretary General at NATO, responsible for, as mentioned, innovation, hybrid, and cyber. And in short, what I try to do is to maintain our innovative edge in order to defend ourselves. We aim to foster and protect NATO's take-up of emerging and disruptive technologies, such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, but also biotechnology, in order to ensure that the alliance maintains its technological edge. And we started this journey in 2021. Today, I want to talk to you about two broad topics. First, about the role of AI in current warfare. I want to look at the future of armed conflict, given the increasing role of AI, and look at its impact on casualty rates. I also want to discuss how NATO and the EU approach the role of AI in warfare vis-à-vis competing powers. And the second big topic I want to talk about is the concerns about the advances in the domain of military AI. And especially, I want to discuss AI-enabled weapons, their development, and their relation to strategic competitors. But before I do that, let me just paint you a picture of what the future battlefield will look like for a young soldier. As a soldier, swarms of AI-powered drones are gathering intelligence on the enemy's troops' movements and supporting you. Wearable computers are fusing this real-time information to help predict the enemy's next movements. And this information is presented to you on an augmented reality helmet. Needless to say, this slice of what the future battlefield looks like is not in the distant future or tomorrow, but it's already happening now. Even in 2024, soldiers' situational awareness and decision-making capabilities are enhanced by technologies that simply didn't exist a few years ago. New technologies shape our security and shape NATO. Nuclear weapons did so in the 20th century, and emerging and disruptive technologies are doing so today. And these technologies, like AI, but also quantum computing, biotech, autonomous systems, offer extraordinary potential advances for humanity at large. Alone, each is powerful, but combined, they will change the world. And they will also, by definition, change the way that we defend ourselves. Just think of AI. It was really science fiction for decades, and today it's an ever-present fact in our lives, but also on the front line, for example, in Ukraine. As one of the most important conflicts since the end of the Cold War, the war in Ukraine can provide us a contemporary example of how AI is changing the way that wars are being fought. Analysts have labeled this war as the first commercial space war, the first full-scale drone war, or the first AI war. See it as the first instance of the imaginary picture that I painted you a few minutes ago. In Ukraine, we've seen employed, in one way or another, most of the technological advances the world has made over the last decades. And we're experiencing the importance of algorithms, of software and data in modern warfare at first hand. The conflict has demonstrated the power of publicly available information and geospatial imagery. For example, to report and analyze movements of Russian aircraft, vehicles and troops, to assess battle damage assessments, and to estimate capabilities and readiness of Russian forces. Similarly, Ukrainian forces have utilized an application called GIS Arta that works like a sort of an Uber for artillery to improve their targeting and quicken their rate of fire. This decentralized and distributed command and control application can process data from a variety of sources, such as drones, smartphones, rangefinders, and connect artillery computers. And once a target is identified, the application sends the fire command to the closest and most suitable platform to carry out the strike. Such innovative applications have reduced the call-to-trigger time by almost tenfold, allowing fewer artillery pieces to be effective against a larger adversary, which is exactly what Ukraine is facing now on the front line. AI is also helping to improve existing weapon systems in other ways. For instance, AI is used in drone operations to automate processes such as takeoff and landing, as well as automatically sending information to the Ukrainian battle management system. AI also aids Ukrainian troops. It helps with targeting, analyzing of satellite imagery for pinpointing attack locations, and estimating the damage that various targets are expected to receive. Ukrainians have also used natural language processing technology to capture, transcribe, translate, and analyze Russian communications, as well as facial recognition technologies to identify Russian soldiers that committed crimes against humanity, for example, in Bucha. In other words, the war has shown that the skillful use of emerging and disruptive technologies can help counter conventional military advantages in armor, artillery, and manpower. It has shown how integrating commercial technology into traditional military capabilities offers outsized asymmetric advantages against a far larger enemy. But the conflict has also highlighted the role of civil society and industry. The war in Ukraine has evolved from a purely military conflict and operation to a whole-of-society effort. It has demonstrated that technology companies are increasingly helping to change the outcomes on the ground. And this experience illustrates key lessons for others not only to learn about, but also to support and to partner on. And one of the most striking examples of this cooperation in Ukraine is their AI-enabled Center of Operations for Threat Assessment. This strategic center, created by the Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council, provides senior officials with guidance on sensitive matters, including their policy and mobilization. It pulls together various types of information, from prices, phone usage, migration, trade and military developments, down to the weapons that are in their repair shops and information obtained by hackers, to create a big threat assessment picture. It's also integrated with outputs from industry model that support the Ukrainians' army maneuver decisions. And some of these new outputs have been crucial in the decisions that they've made in this war of aggression from Russia. For both Ukraine and Russia, different unmanned systems, primarily, though not exclusively, unmanned aerial vehicles, have proven decisive at different moments in this war. In addition to the use of a variety of military drones that already existed, the extensive use of non-military drones by the Ukrainian forces and the impact of Ukrainian volunteer and hobbyist drone units have created some of the world's premier experts on building, modifying, and using small, cheap drones in warfare. And Ukrainians are using these commercial, off-the-shelf drones simply because their immediate availability and replaceability. And they also offer these abilities at a much lower price than systems made for the military, meaning that forces can actually accept losses. For example, the Ukrainians use inexpensive drones of approximately $400, flown by operators that can deliver an explosive charge that is capable of destroying a Russian tank that is worth more than $2 million. We've seen that AI already has an impact on and will continue to affect the operational, strategic, and the tactical levels of military operations. However, how will the technology affect casualties on the battlefield? And should we prepare for a dystopian future due to the use of AI? The reality is actually expected to be much more positive than that. And the responsible use of AI will help save the lives of soldiers on the battlefield and will help reduce the number of civilian casualties. For example, deploying AI in armed conflict situations for medical purposes can save countless lives. AI can be deployed by military doctors to speed up the decision-making process when triaging the injured based on who needs medical attention first. And such AI applications are already being used in civilian medicine. The technology can also improve logistics, allowing for injured soldiers to reach hospitals and medicine faster. To look at this question, it's important to see how AI can be used in warfare. And overall, it's used in two kinds of weaponry. The first are the conventional weapon systems that use AI to augment its capabilities. And a good example here will be artillery, that augments its precision through the use of AI. The other types of systems are those that are primarily reliant on AI to be useful in combat. Autonomous vehicles, such as drones, are a good example of this. On the first, augmenting traditional weaponry with AI, as in making it more precise, will reduce the number of casualties. The rate of misfired rounds from artillery will be reduced following the input of AI in military systems. And already, smart bombs are showing us how specific individuals can be incapacitated without damaging its surroundings. Now, the second kind of system that I talked about, such as autonomous vehicles, are a more complex case. And many leading AI scientists and non-governmental organizations have called for a preemptive, legally binding treaty to ban autonomous weapons, and discussions to govern their use are being held as we speak in the United Nations. These warnings and campaigns are motivated by concerns that autonomous weapons could increase civilian casualties in war. And in reality, autonomous weapons that are responsible and trustworthy are extremely precise in their targeting, reducing civilian casualties. But if the underlying AI relies, for example, on biased data, or should they fall into the hands of an actor or a state that cares little about civilian casualties or that wants to punish a civilian population, they could be used to commit devastating atrocities. That is why it's so important to innovate responsibly, and that's why NATO has committed to this loud and clear. As we develop these technologies, we must do so consciously and with a deep regard to our values, our freedom, our democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Not to stifle innovation, but to enable it in a responsible way. And if we don't do this in a responsible way, we risk to lose everything. That is why our A strategy from 2021 adopts 6 principles of responsible use to govern the use of AI in defense, focusing on lawfulness, responsibility and accountability, explainability and traceability, reliability, governability, and bias mitigation. We have to create a predictable, trustworthy, responsible environment where everyone feels comfortable with these new technologies. And that's no mean feat, given the challenge of understanding how algorithms work. By adhering to standards of responsible use and keeping the human in the loop, we will ensure that AI-enabled autonomous systems will neither cause excess harm nor will have the unintended consequences. And these standards are driven by our core identity, namely that we're an alliance of values, of democracies, and that's exactly what sets us apart from our adversaries and our competitors. To implement this approach, we've established a Data and AI Review Board, which governs the responsible use of AI at NATO. Now, our adversaries and our strategic competitors are also exploiting AI tools and technologies to refine their warfare capabilities in both the physical and the cyber realm. And this also includes AI-enabled weapon systems. China, and to a lesser degree Russia, has doubled down on investments in dual-use AI technologies and applications, such as natural language processing and computer vision. They are aggressively exploring generative AI, integrating it into their toolkit and strategies, and using it as a tool for disruption. They've also announced publicly that they intend to cooperate on the development of military AI capabilities together. Additionally, China has established, with significant state support, data farms that are used to collect, store, and analyze vast amounts of data and to develop, among others, advanced AI technologies and applications. And AI is already influencing the information and hybrid warfare, for example, by enabling more precise cyber attacks and targeted disinformation campaigns at scale. And think about the potential impact on our democracies, especially in this year when billions of people around the world will vote in major elections, and the results will definitely have an impact on the way the world is run after them. AI-powered bots and manipulated audio and video content, including deepfakes, can be exploited to amplify efforts to interfere in the democratic processes of open societies like ours. In Taiwan, an AI deepfake gained attention earlier this year by stirring concerns about US interference in local politics. The fake clip that was circulating on TikTok showed a US representative promising stronger US military support for Taiwan if the incumbent party's candidate were elected in January, thus exacerbating political tensions in the region. In the context of security and defense, AI-enabled information operations might affect the outcome of elections, sow division and confusion across the alliance, demobilize or demoralize societies and militaries in times of conflict, as well as lower trust in institutions and authorities with importance to the alliance. So we work together with experts from allies and industry to respond to these challenges. These technologies are capable of challenging the perception of truth and authenticity. Some experts say that in 5 years' time, 90% of what you will see online will be fake. But it doesn't stop there. There are also risks that our strategic adversaries and potential competitors can misuse this technology to corrode the information environment, to worsen cyber threats, and to lower barriers to entry for weapons of mass destruction like chemical or biological weapons. The impact of this foundational shift on the alliance security demands immediate attention and policy action. And that's why at NATO we aim at a global level to ensure that the development, the testing, and the use of AI-enabled weapons is done in a responsible and a safe manner, in full compliance with existing international law and our rules and values. We will conduct our development and adoption of AI-powered weapons through these objectives. And of course, one of the biggest challenges there will be to understand how our adversaries and competitors will pursue the use of AI in the military domain. As I said in the beginning, nuclear weapons shaped defense and security in the 20th century. Emerging and disruptive technologies are shaping it today. And as it happened during the Cold War, today AI-enabled weapons require us to establish common boundaries and rules to ensure their responsible use. And this requires cooperation with our closest partners. It also requires us to maintain the dialogue open with our strategic competitors. And that's why important diplomatic conversations are taking place at the multilateral level to discuss common rules for lethal autonomous weapon systems and applications of military AI. And my people are actually speaking to the Chinese delegation about this next week. Allies individually are actively engaged at the UN and in other ad hoc fora to discuss common rules and to tackle challenges related to the development of AI-powered weapons. And in this way, we also need to be discussing, including with others on the global stage, like China or Russia, as I mentioned. Allies have been at the forefront of diplomatic efforts to engage the international community to adopt common principles and to advance this conversation. AI in the military domain will both represent challenges but also opportunities. And regulation or arms control rules and principles have historically been a crucial tool to shape behaviors and to mitigate some of the risks that come with the implementation of that technology. For these rules to be effective, we really need political will from all sides to discuss accountability and responsibility, and the guarantee that most fundamental rules and values will be respected. And that will not be an easy task, given the geopolitical tensions. AI is calling for global efforts to effectively be able to mitigate its risks. It's hard, but it's not the first time that strategic competitors and adversaries come together to establish red lines on the use of lethal weapons. And luckily, we're not alone in this fight. We work closely with the European Union and other like-minded partners to counter many of these threats. The NATO-EU partnership is founded on our shared values, our determination to tackle common challenges, and our unequivocal commitment to promote and safeguard peace, freedom, and prosperity in the Euro-Atlantic area. And we shouldn't forget that 23 of the 32 NATO allies are also EU member states, which facilitates a close cooperation. We work side by side in crisis management, on capability development, in providing support to our common partners, as well as to address the challenges posed by the growing strategic competition in the world. And we have a strategic dialogue with the EU on emerging and disruptive technology to exchange information on policy development, research, and innovation. While I'm approaching the end of my lecture here to you, I'd like to remind you that security is our shared responsibility. We're all in this together. New cooperation paradigms between government, academia, and industry are needed to prevent and respond to crisis. The war in Ukraine teaches us valuable lessons and demonstrates how military and civilian stakeholders, government, industry, and academia need to work together. When a conflict will come, it will not be the military alone taking care of it. It will require all of us to come together and fight an adversary. The area where industry in that, and particularly the tech sector, could choose to remain neutral is diminishing. And I've often sat on a panel with Google who were saying that they don't engage with the defense community for ethical reasons. But I always have to remind them that the day after the brutal invasion of Ukraine, it was actually Google Maps that was being used by the Russians to target a large number of civilians that were stuck on the roads fleeing to the west to maximize the number of casualties. When the tech is freely available, as most of technology is, it can and probably will be used for bad. So the question is, how do we together make sure that we're responsible users of that technology. For NATO, it means we want to engage more with the innovator communities on the ground through new initiatives and bodies such as Diana and the NATO Innovation Fund that are designed to foster innovation in EDTs and protect such efforts from potential adversaries or competitors. Diana, which is our accelerator for startups, now counts 23 accelerator sites and 182 test centers across the Allied territory. Moreover, in addition to the already up and running Diana London hub at Imperial College in London, a regional hub in Tallinn, Estonia, and an office in Halifax will open soon. In its pilot year, Diana received 1,300 applications for the challenge call that we launched. And unfortunately, we could only let 44 companies in that were tackling each of the 3 challenges that we asked for. One is on secure information sharing, one was on energy resilience, and one was on sensing and surveillance in the undersea infrastructure. And we're really excited about the enthusiasm that was there to work with NATO, and we cannot wait to see the progress and maturation. Alongside Diana, we've also launched a NATO Innovation Fund, which is the world's first multi-sovereign, standalone investment fund in the world, operating under market standards and employing a world-class team of venture capitalists to lead us in pursuit of providing funding opportunities to disruptors and innovators that will change the world of tomorrow. Its first sub-fund contains 1 billion euros that is investing in early-stage commercial EDTs that can also be of significance for security and defense. The NIF is a principled, impact-prioritizing investor providing patient capital, market opportunity, and technological diligence and validation to its founders. It's guided by the Alliance's frameworks for gender equality and climate security, and the NIF will embed ESG considerations and NATO's democratic values into its daily deal-making. It will provide risk capital directly into startups and indirectly into other deep tech venture capital funds that align with our strategic objectives and with NATO's mission. So among those of you that have an entrepreneurial mindset and a good idea for a dual-use security solution, please pay attention to these initiatives. In conclusion, the nature of warfare is changing rapidly due to these and other forms of innovation that are coming online in a record tempo. What the conflict in Ukraine continues to tell us is that in the battlefield of the future, those can harness the potential of these technologies quickly will prevail. And what is clear is that innovating responsibly and together with EU and partners is crucial to minimize civilian harm. NATO is and will continue to be the gold standard of ethical use for these technologies in defense. The rapid adoption and development of new technologies is essential for us to maintain our deterrence and defense. But to get the most of new technologies, we have to act responsibly. We all play its part. And if you want to be part of it, then please do consider to apply for an internship at NATO. We are no longer only about hardcore military, we are about security as large to protect 1 billion people living in democracies worldwide. Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks. Thank you, David van Weel, for your presentation and for raising some important points. I wrote down sort of a focus on how new technologies, including artificial intelligence, are changing the way we fight, changing the battlefield of the future that is unfolding right now. Also, the importance of new actors entering the battlefield, tech actors. This is actually the focus of much of my research currently, so I will speak to that also in a minute. And also something that you included a lot in your talk, the importance of responsible use of these technologies. The importance also of keeping the human in the loop, and these are also points that I will speak to in my discussion. So thank you for providing the sort of springboard, and thank you also for providing a platform for raising these questions and for having this debate, Michal and colleagues here. And thank you for inviting me to discuss some of these points and provide also a critical perspective, because full openness here, or full disclosure, I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who has been following these debates with concern for some time, and increasingly also now that we see the battlefield of the future already unfolding now, currently in Gaza and in Ukraine. So as someone speaking from that perspective, me and David will disagree on many things. We do, however, agree that we are in a critical moment. One, however, that has been in the making, and that has been fueled also in recent years by a highly rhetorical but also material arms race and military investments in offset technology, including AI. But also, it has also been fueled by recent advances in AI that are primarily the product of significantly concentrated data and also computing resources that reside in the hands of only a few companies, we could say. You mentioned Google, and I will come back to Google as an important example. Whether this is an AI revolution, which is the title of this conference, or an evolution, is in fact a much debated question within the field of international relations and security studies. And certainly, if we look at the context of Ukraine, we can see how traditional heavy weaponry and destruction go hand in hand with experimentation with new technologies, including AI. At the same time, the ways in which the use of AI is unfolding in today's context of war and conflict has very real and material consequences that we can maybe typify indeed as revolutionary. And again, David van Weel already emphasized and introduced the idea of or showed how the battlefield is changing, how these technologies change the way in which we fight, how we see more autonomous systems entering the battlefield, etc. But we can also see, and that's the focus of my discussion here, that it is very much that these technologies are very much changing the lived experiences and realities of soldiers, but also citizens and civilians on the battlefield or in war and conflict. And these realities of AI-enabled, or what we can call algorithmic warfare, are currently highly visible in the context of Gaza, where recent investigative work by a collective of Israeli and Palestinian journalists interviewing IDF officers about their use of AI in military targeting is revealing the realities and impact of AI on the battlefield right now. And so based on these recent insights from the war in Gaza, but also the war in Ukraine, I want to make 3 points about the political, the ethical, and the accountability challenges that are related to AI warfare. The first point is related to speed and scale. So for a long time, both proponents and opponents of AI warfare have argued that AI will considerably increase the speed of warfighting. And today we are witnessing how AI is indeed accelerating and automating military decision-making at an important scale, including in relation to critical targeting decisions. But we are also seeing how AI systems are increasing the scale and scope of targeting and destruction. So David van Weel spoke about how AI might save lives, provide us with more precision. But in the context of Gaza, in fact, what we're seeing and what these reports are revealing is that AI is feeding into the scope and the scale of destruction. The IDF is currently using various AI systems to inform critical targeting decisions. We have reports about 3 of these systems. One is the Gospel, which is an AI system that collects and considers millions of items of data to mark buildings in Gaza for destruction by airstrikes. Another system called Lavender does the same, but then for people, so it collects data and ingests data, everything from cell phone use to WhatsApp group membership, to calculate the likeliness that someone is a Hamas militant. And then there's another system called Where's Daddy, which is a system that tracks the top-ranked individuals on that list and sends a signal when these people return to their home so that they can be bombed when they're at home. So these are the systems that we have knowledge about currently being used in the context of Gaza. This Lavender system reportedly has identified as many as 37,000 Palestinians as suspected militants, and therefore also as legitimate targets. Combined with the IDF accepting collateral damage ratios as high as 20 civilians, and also the fact that they're using dumb bombs to attack primarily lower-ranking militants, this, at least in part, explains the devastatingly high number of civilian casualties that we're currently seeing in the Gaza war. Of course, these systems do not operate fully autonomously. They don't operate in a vacuum. They are designed and used by people, by us, and they always operate in a specific political and military context. For example, in the case of Lavender, the system mainly provides a way of responding to high political pressures and demands, military demands also for a continuous pipeline of targets, as one IDF officer said. At the same time, systems like these do play a major role in increasing the speed and scale of targeting, as they allow for the further systematization of killing or the delegation of very critical lethal decisions to a machine. As one IDF officer said, the machine did it coldly, and that made it easier to strike. So this brings me to the second point, which is about human control and oversight. For years, the international community has agreed that humans must remain somehow in the loop of military decision-making, and that they should be capable of exercising meaningful human control. However, with autonomous drones operational in Ukraine and algorithmic targeting happening in Gaza, we should now question the usefulness of this concept. Take again the Lavender system used in Gaza by the IDF. IDF officers have revealed that due to time pressure and the explosion of targets generated by this very system, they have about 20 seconds to review each target. So one officer said, "I had zero added value as a human. Apart from being a stamp of approval, it saved a lot of time." And we see similar developments elsewhere, such as in the context of a US Department of Defense project called Project Maven, which was established in 2017, a collaboration, in fact, with Google, which was a prototype project but has developed into a full-blown AI-enabled targeting program, and which was currently covered by Bloomberg reporting. And Bloomberg cites an officer summarizing the process of responding or using the system, saying that basically he was just accepting the suggestion or the output that was generated by the system. So how meaningful then is human control, or can it be in this context of speeding up and accelerating decisions in war? And also speaking to the question of international law, how lawful can these systems still be then if humans have only very limited time to review the decisions suggested by these kinds of systems? Finally, then, we should say something about accountability and responsibility for algorithmic warfare or algorithmic violence. What is obvious here is that responsibility in the algorithmic kill chain is increasingly blurred and dispersed, involving the military, but also increasingly high-tech companies, both large and small, which are exercising considerable influence. Think of Elon Musk's company SpaceX, which operates a Starlink satellite network that has become indispensable as a communications infrastructure for Ukraine's military. But also think of a company like Palantir, which is a US-based surveillance company that is heavily involved in the targeting process in Ukraine, in fact claims to have become responsible for most of the targeting in Ukraine. In Gaza, we know that Google and Amazon, under the controversial contract project Nimbus, have led the groundwork for algorithmic targeting by building a cloud environment that allows the Israeli government to engage in AI-enabled facial recognition, automated image categorization, and object tracking. In between are numerous military startups which are providing military technology to the Ukrainian and Israeli military, not by a direction of government contracts or even as part of a governmental plan, but instead through the independent decision-making of the individual company. And this raises profound political questions, not only about how these companies are pushing AI onto the battlefield, but also related to the regulation of military technology, the preservation of public accountability in military activity, and ultimately democratic control. It means that even if NATO members successfully develop and then adhere to the principles of the responsible use of AI in warfare, we cannot be certain that the companies would do the same. Think again of Elon Musk, right, as a prime example of someone who might decide to do something else. Or of Google, which has in fact been quick to deny its responsibility in Gaza, saying that once Google offers these services, we have no technical capacity to monitor what our customers are doing with these services. They could be doing anything. This is what Google responded in relation to the critique related to Project Nimbus. So where does this lead us? Amidst this acceleration, it is crucial to slow down and really take stock of what we're currently seeing, the current experiences in both Gaza and Ukraine. So here I think we do agree that it's very important to slow down, to invest in diplomatic efforts and global governance. We need to set frameworks to govern the use of AI in warfare. This must not just be about mitigating risks, but about ensuring that those who are behind the development of these systems take better care in both their design and in their use, including by understanding how they are themselves also responsible, both politically and legally. This applies to states, but also to industry partners who are pushing these boundaries forward in this very moment, and who cannot wash their hands of accountability by claiming, as Google does, that they're not responsible for how their products are used once they are on the market. Most of all, the future of algorithmic warfare is already now, it's unfolding today, and the designs and political decisions made today will shape its trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to both David and Marijn for their comments. David, would you like to join us on the podium? We're now going to move to discussion, and you will certainly have a lot of questions. I will abuse my privilege as being the chair to actually ask the first question, which is, we have heard from both of you a lot about the role of companies. We heard a lot about what NATO is doing. We heard a lot about competitors. We heard also about other actors. But we are here in the Netherlands, in Europe, and we haven't heard a lot, and a lot of people from our audience might actually end up going to policymaking in Europe and in the Netherlands. And so the question that I think is on the mind of a lot of people is, are we completely helpless as Europeans, as European countries? Or is there something that European countries can do to, either in sort of developing more responsible solutions, or in pushing for frameworks that would encourage responsible, accountable use of AI? It's an easy question, so whoever wants to start can start.
Is it? Well, I can only speak on behalf of 32 nations, and one of them is the Netherlands. And I think that what drives us here in this endeavor is what I mentioned as our shared values and norms that we take into the way that we conduct defense and deterrence. And that is really what sets us apart. not necessarily the weapons you use, but how you use the weapons you have. So if we look at Bucha, Russia didn't need AI to slaughter and torture a whole village. And the same goes for Hamas terrorists on the 7th of October. But I don't want to automatically, by saying that, say that any use of AI in a battlefield is justified. No, it really is about how do we bake our values and norms into policies and into what tech companies are required to provide, and therefore make sure that we have reliable AI. And depending on where the technology stands, you mentioned Maven in 2017. I spoke to OpenAI yesterday. They said their Chat-GPT is now at high school level. They expect it to go up to PhD level next year. But of course, these are still nascent technologies. So we constantly need to take into account, and a lot of that knowledge is with you. Where does technology stand? What do we find acceptable, ethical? And how do we bring that into policy? So our Data and AI Review Board, I think of the 32 members, there's only 2 military on it. We have ethics professors, we have lawyers, we have arms control diplomats, so we have private entrepreneurs, so we have all walks of life, because this is something that not one actor can do on its own. So wherever you work, please keep in mind that you might contribute to this responsible governing of AI.
Thank you. Marijn.
Yeah, related to the Dutch context, I think it's an interesting case study also for students here who might be interested in these questions for 2 reasons. So on the one hand, the Netherlands has been quite active, in fact, in pushing for this frame of responsible use of AI in the military domain, trying to also move away from the discussion of fully autonomous weapon systems or killer robots, which is the term that no one uses anymore because it's too confusing. It doesn't do much good. But I think the Netherlands has been interested, I think, in opening up the discussion and looking at other applications of use. Military use when it comes to artificial intelligence, and trying indeed to move towards a common shared framework of using these types of applications responsibly, organizing a summit last year in February in The Hague, and then in September there's a follow-up conference on this question of how can we operationalize this question of responsible use of AI. The other thing is that for a smaller country, the Netherlands has been quite interested, in fact, in trying to develop these kinds of capacities as a way of specializing, providing added value also to the alliance. And I think following these developments, you can see how difficult it also is to indeed integrate these technologies, integrate these systems, and use technologies that are initially developed for the commercial sector and then bring them to the military domain and integrate them here. And we see also that the Dutch military, for instance, is struggling with this and sort of trying to make this happen. But it is pushing this forward. So in that sense, it's sort of a leader in it tries to be a leader in this space as well. My worry there is that with the speed of all of these developments, what we see is, in fact, a sort of such a focus on trying to implement or trying to integrate these systems that we get sloppy AI into the military, which basically creates sort of is sort of the worst of the outcome, because we have both AI for critical decisions, but also bad AI then for these types of decisions.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We have about half an hour for from the questions from the audience and some answers from our speakers. We're going to collect them in groups of 3, and we're going to start on the left. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and then go to Lesja, who has a microphone. Sorry, it's your left and my right. Doesn't really matter. We're going to start with Lesja, 3 questions, and then we're going to go back to the audience, and then on my left, your right. with David. Again, if you have a question, raise your hand and then go to the side. It will be fantastic for the flow of the discussion if you have a question, not a statement. Or don't try to finish your statement with a saying, do you agree, at the end. This is what academics do sometimes.
All the time.
So, OK, I'm not going to talk too much. So any questions from the left-hand side? OK, so let's say 1, 2, 3. So you can go over there. So both of you, actually.
Yeah, you mentioned UN regulation that needs to be established. And I'm wondering, like, how would this look like in practice, that countries are really aligned on their values and don't back out, in a sense, and then, yeah, don't adhere to these regulations?
Thank you.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for your insightful talk. I have a question regarding the usage of the term military realm AI. Today's event is about AI in the military, supposedly vis-à-vis civilian application of AI technologies. And we see examples. For example, there was one case of civilian market drones being used by the Ukrainian military. So we see civilian tech making its way to the military realm. Do we also see the opposite? Do we see military technologies or AI technologies initially developed in a military context also making its way to the civilian market? And if so, what are the ethical consequences of that? And is that desirable? Thank you.
Perfect. And then the gentleman in the middle, but you have to walk over there, to the side. Sorry about this.
Yeah, my question regards to what you mentioned, that AI can make it a lot more efficient, and you also provided example from Gaza that it at least is used at the moment to save a lot of time. And I see the need for regulation there. But if we think about terrorist organization, I think my question regards to how would you evaluate the risk we will run into in a few years, maybe a decade, if this technology, which makes warfare and thereby also attacks a lot easier, a lot cheaper, a lot easier to control remotely, how would you evaluate this risk we will run into as a Western civilization if we push for innovation, for example, also through an investment fund, putting a lot of money and efforts into improving this efficiency and this ease of attacking?
Perfect. Thank you very much. I know there were more questions on this end. We're going to go to the other side, and then I'll come back if there is more time. Both of you, go wild.
You want to start this time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can speak to all three questions. Maybe starting with the second question, which is, do we also see this development happening in the reverse direction? We've seen this for a long time. So a lot of the technologies that we used were developed initially in the military, like GPS, the internet, your Apple phone, partly funded by the military. AI, in fact, is a military technology by tradition, right? So it was developed in the 50s at least, or sort of originated in the 50s as a military project. So for a long time, most of these innovations have in fact been pushed by the military and have been funded through the military. Since the 1990s, 2000s, we see indeed the sort of the reverse direction, where most of the innovation is taking place in the commercial domain, and where indeed militaries are now trying to partner up with some of these very innovative companies that in order to also bring those technologies back to the military. So in a way, yeah, it's an interesting question because it speaks also to something that I always try to highlight, is that AI would not exist. I mean, these companies would not exist in this way if the military was not there or has not been here. Then maybe a question of regulation or the need for regulation, or the question of what happens if we don't regulate and this technology falls into the wrong hands. I think that's also that's a question that we all agree on. That makes also that we need to look for regulation and for regulatory efforts, and to really proceed with those regulatory efforts, as we did in relation to other technologies, right, in the past. And there are ample examples of technologies, weapons that have been regulated, at least to some extent, because there's always this question of the fact that we are an international community. There's no sovereign that is governing the international community and that can actually discipline everyone and control everyone. No, we don't have a world police officer, so to say. So there's regulation is only effective to a certain extent, but it is effective, and we know it is, and we know that it has been effective in relation to other systems and other technologies. So that's all the more reason I think to engage in those diplomatic efforts, even if it's indeed very difficult in today's geopolitical times, for sure.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just add to that, because of course I fully agree with everything you said. The challenging part with UN regulation will be two things. One is the age of strategic competition that we're in. We clearly have Russia and China aligning openly behind each other against the international rules-based order that we've set up. That is a challenge if you want to come to a new kind of binding treaty in the form of a UN treaty or otherwise. So I'm not overly hopeful that we'll be able to get there. I do believe that if we get to a binding treaty, we need those two on board, because that's where the biggest danger will come from. The second challenge I see is that, unlike with nuclear weapons, these technologies are pretty fluent and readily available. So you can tell me that your drone has certain AI programming in it, but I have no way to verify it. So you could say that you adhere to these norms and values, and in the meantime produce something completely different. And the first time we'll find out is on the battlefield, when we have to fight each other. And all of a sudden I see that you took advantage of the fact that we inhibited ourselves and are now using that to combat us. That is a real risk with these technologies that are really hard to verify. So with nuclear weapons, we all understood that the impact of the use of a nuclear weapon is so devastating, and that a nuclear war would lead to the eradication of the world, that up until today, that has led to an informal kind of non-use agreement. I think if we get to something, a realization like that in the field of AI, that we all realize that there are certain boundaries that we don't want to cross, then we have a good chance of getting somewhere in the international domain, even if we don't agree on a lot of other things. On the civ-mil-tech, I would fully support that. Our challenge at the moment is that a lot of this tech actually comes from the civilian world, is completely unregulated. And the big power that big tech now has, companies like Google, Amazon, etc., is a result of the government not having been involved in the whole process of development. And the power of these companies is now so huge that we might not like it, but that's what we have to deal with. And a country like Ukraine could have never survived the cyber war that they were under if it wasn't for companies like Microsoft and Google. So I'm not really happy with that development, which is why I want us to be involved early again in technology, so that we can also flag the potential dangers. I'll give you one example. I was in Silicon Valley a few weeks ago in a biotech company that is working on DNA changing medicine. So they're able to, in the body, alter your DNA so that, for example, hereditary diseases like sickle cell disease become extinct, which is fantastic. But then I asked them for 10 minutes, can you think about how your technology could be used in a nefarious way? And they came up with horror scenarios, they themselves, which they've never thought about because they're not thinking about security purposes per se. But if we're there early and we can cooperate and make sure that we protect that technology from nefarious use, I think we're in a best place to prevent unwanted things. And that leads into the third question, which is the tech into terrorist hands because it becomes so readily available. Yeah, that is a danger. I mean, if you think about biotech, then we're probably 5 years away from people printing pathogens on a 3D printer in their home and releasing them into society. So yes, we do need to regulate and be careful here and make sure that we have the right structures in place.
Perfect. Now we're going to shift to the other side. The lady with keffiyeh, and then the two people in front. The lady and the gentleman in the middle. Go ahead. No, you can go ahead. You were the first. And then you and the gentleman in the middle.
Okay, so to you, David, as a former Erasmian, I'm wondering if this is your way of positive change. So developing deadlier weapons for a genocidal and apartheid state like Israel to kill innocent Palestinians. I really wonder if you actually believe your own bullshit and how you, as a Zionist, can sleep at night. And I'd encourage everybody to read the flyer that you got and free Palestine.
Can I respond directly?
Sure,
because,
go ahead.
I mean, I don't know what me, having gone to a certain school here in Rotterdam, has anything to do with the open discussion that we're trying to have here. I also haven't advocated the use of any kind of weapon in the Gaza Strip. So what we're trying to have here is a discussion on the ethical use of AI. Do I believe in my mission? Do I sleep well at night? Yes, I do. Because what I'm trying to do is to protect our 1 billion citizens from something happening like happened to Ukraine. And yes, in order to defend yourself, and in order, even better, to deter a conflict from ever getting here, you need to be strong, and you need weapons. That's a fact of history, and it's been like that for thousands of years.
So how do you explain the 35,000 Palestinian deaths?
I don't. I haven't been speaking to that, so don't blame them on me. It's got nothing to do with me.
Thank you for your points today. A related point to something that both of you hinted at is the potential benefits that AI could bring to the field, but unfortunately we are seeing still that they are applied in weapon systems that already exist. And an argument that is being made by some experts is that AI will actually make war more brutal because of the double fog of war, both the distance that it creates, but also the black box nature of AI. So what is the reality? Is AI going to be used for good, or is it going to be used to justify and enable certain views and controls of the world as we are seeing now? Thank you.
So every technology...
Can we
sorry,
get one more?
we're collecting, sorry. Jumping the gun here.
Okay. Thanks for your speech, and I am a legal researcher in Erasmus Law School, so I have two questions about the legal perspective of it. One is it's also being discussed in the EU level, I think. It's about the interplay between the cybersecurity and data protection and maybe privacy. So is there a ranking, or how do you think it's, is there a ranking of these factors? And my second question is about the, I read about the tiling manual based on the NATO cybersecurity strategy, and I wonder, is there any new developments in the definition of the concept of sovereignty in recent years in the cyber warfare? Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. So, both of you, please go ahead and answer these two questions. And then we're going to go back to the audience.
Will AI be used for good or for bad? And is there a percentage you can hang to it? I think with every technology, we have to realize that most of what a new technology will bring is for good. And most of technology is developed for good purposes. I mentioned the biotech example just now. I mean, these people were curers of diseases that were incurable for hundreds of years. So that's great. But we also need to be vigilant about technology that will be used for bad purposes. As soon as we were all connected through the internet, we saw internet criminals using the internet to spread their crime on a much larger base. So this will happen with AI, it will happen with every technology. And the question is, how do we make sure that we at least are on the responsible side of this use? And I think that most of the things you mentioned now on the black box, on the 20 seconds that you mentioned, I think most of the lessons we have to learn now is how do we make this human interaction meaningful? So we are entering a stage where processing of data is so difficult because there's so much available and it's so hard to see what is true, what is not true, how do we filter? So this also counts for the battlefield. So we will need AI to help us in gathering, aggregating this information. But then the question is, how well trained is the human to realize and know the weaknesses of AI and the AI tools that he's using in order to be able to intervene at the right point in time and not feel like a rubber stamp machine. If I hear the rubber stamp example, I blame that mainly on not understanding the AI we're using and not training the people that are teaming up with that AI. On cybersecurity, basically I call this a failed domain. We didn't manage to regulate the cyber realm. We haven't been able to get any kind of deterrence established in the cyber domain. And we no longer think there's a distinction between peacetime, crisis, or war in cyberspace. We're continuously under attack, and there's a kind of a lawless country, whether it's in the criminal gangs using ransomware against our vital infrastructure or hospitals, or it's states that are sabotaging infrastructure back and forth. I think we're in need of establishing some kind of international norms and rules in cyberspace again. But I'm afraid something terrible will need to happen before we realize we need to create new boundaries.
Marijn.
Yeah, I'm first speaking to the question of will it be used for bad or for good? I like your question, but I'm going to push back against the way in which you asked the question, because it seems to suggest that the technology is neutral. And so it's something that I'm trying to problematize here by saying, at least when we look at how the technology is currently deployed and used, that not to say that the technology has agency or fully determines, but it enables at least a regime in which we need to sort of speed up, or we can speed up decision making and also delegate those decisions elsewhere, which then also allows us to delegate responsibility, so to say. So it's not in a way a neutral technology, right? There's a lot in AI and in the system that actually allows for this, for the way in which it is being used in the current moment. But what you say is at a sort of the double problem here is definitely something that is very important and that we don't really have an answer to. So one is the question of the black box, and question of transparency that we haven't really talked about is what is happening within this black box. And so Daft is saying, hey, we need to better understand what it is doing. We need to better understand as humans why the machine is, or why the AI is giving a certain output or suggesting a certain decision. The problem is that the AIs that we see being developed are increasingly intransparent, right? There's, again, also this notion of speed and this imperative of speed that, yeah, basically limits or obstructs better knowledge of what is happening within the black box. So that's definitely a problem, the problem of intransparency, and can we actually access the decision-making that is happening there? And then the other question is that it also, as I was already suggesting, and as part of your second element, is that it also allows us as humans to remove ourselves from this decision and to wash our hands from responsibility and accountability in this question. So that's another element of this technology that I think is very specific to AI and is worrisome. Yeah. Maybe a final thing about question of privacy. So I guess privacy is a luxury that people don't have, right, in the context of war and conflict. But what is happening with this technology is that mass surveillance, in a way, becomes, and all the data that is being collected on the behaviors of people, on the data that they themselves also provide, is feeding into these AI systems. So as many of you know, or many of you are critically following the debates in relation to the Israel-Palestine conflict, is that for a long time, Palestinian people have been mass surveyed, right, by technologies that are developed and deployed by Israel. And now these same technologies and that same data, it appears, we don't know for sure, I mean, we don't know the details yet, but it seems that that data also becomes very useful now to establish calculations or to calculate whether someone is a legitimate target, yes or no. So that means that surveillance practices appear to be weaponized, which is really something that we should push back against in the years to come.
Perfect. We have about 10 minutes to go, which means that we have time for maybe 2-3 quick questions. I know there was one question in the back that I didn't take in the first round. Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? 1, 2. Okay, perfect. So we have 1, 2, 3 questions. So I would recommend that you can go to Lesia and you two can go to David to ask your questions over there. And then hopefully we're going to satisfy all your thirst for knowledge. Go ahead.
All right. So I had several questions, but I'm only going to pick one. Do you think that given all this development of AI, the soldiers and field soldiers will still be relevant in the coming years, or will drones and more autonomous weapons replace them?
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. That was a good example of a quick question. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. For practical reasons, it seems that you're trying to develop it in a more responsible way, but it seems like you're ending up in a prisoner's dilemma. Why don't you want to go for the optimal route and try to not use this, not develop this technology altogether?
Very good question.
So I'm currently in a team of developing the new curriculum at the medical school of Erasmus Medical Center, and we are also looking for ways to incorporate or integrate AI technology in the curriculum, because we indeed see that AI technology is increasingly used in healthcare, but a large proportion of doctors don't even know what it is. So looking for ways to facilitate students to learn, to get to know more about AI. So what would your advice be to curriculum developers in how to teach students, medical students, about AI technology?
Since you were very quick, I think we have time for one more question, and that's going to be the last question of the evening. So is there anyone who wants to be the last person to ask a question? You want to have second one? Okay, go wild. Since your first one was very short.
All right. So, yeah, it's probably another short question, but nuclear weapons has been one of the main criteria over the last years to establish and rank military powers. Do you believe that AI would be, in the coming years, the new ranking criteria when it comes to military powers in the world?
Oh, that's an easy question. Ironic. Okay, so you have 4 easy questions.
I can think.
Whoever wants to start.
Where are my notes? I'm leaving the soldiers. Will they still be relevant to you? Then there's a question about suggestions for an AI curriculum, and then there's a second question that's very much connected to yours, and then a ranking question of ranking. Maybe related to what suggestions would we have for integrating AI into the curriculum, not just for a medical school. I think this applies to all schools and all disciplines. And it's probably related to what you were already suggesting and mentioning, related to the question of human-machine interaction, right? So how we as humans relate to the machine, and how we develop a sort of critical posture towards the suggestions that are raised by by a machine. We know very well that AI is biased, that it's based on very crude categorizations. Big companies, also NGOs, are trying to mitigate that, but it's very difficult to see how that would work, given that it's based on the data that we all feed it. So this is something I think that would be very important for doctors, but definitely also for people who train to be in the military, is to have a course on ethics and AI, what it means to relate to AI, what AI can do and cannot do, and where we as humans have a very critical or should have a meaningful critical involvement. So that's related to that question. In relation to ranking, I think most scholars would see AI still mostly as an enabling technology, as sort of all enabling technology that definitely, of course, feeds into the power of states, definitely when combined with nuclear power. So this is a question that is also getting increased attention within the field and within the discipline of international relations and security studies. What happens when AI decides whether to respond to a nuclear attack, yes or no, for instance, right? So, so these are critical questions. But whether it will be the sort of game changer as nuclear weaponry or nuclear technology is a question, because it is, again, it's an all-enabling technology, so it's everywhere, and it can be integrated in all these different tasks and capacities of any military. It's also much easier to acquire, as David was saying, and it's less easy to verify.
I'll give the floor to David, but I will abuse my position to answer your question about the AI in medical field. I spent 11 hours on a flight to Salt Lake City 2 weeks ago, sitting next to a Danish professor of medicine, of radiology, who was actually working on a paper on how you can basically use natural language processing with image recognition to automate the production of radiology reports. And he said that the biggest problem to put that into sort of production is the human factor, that the other radiologists don't trust what the machine has done, even though it's trained on hundreds of thousands of other reports. So I think that also we should not forget that, you know, there are things that you can do as a on technological end, but at the end of the day, in many fields, it's still human who decides, and that matters still. David.
Yeah, thanks. Just on a negative note, in the end, I don't think it will be the human in all cases that decides. And I'll give you an example on full self-driving cars. I mean, now you get a fine if you put your Tesla on full self-drive. I wouldn't exclude that in 15 years you get a fine if you drive yourself. That's because the technology will make steps. That's because, however strange it sounds, we will get used to sometimes somebody getting killed by a self-driving car. But we all know that only 10% of the people die that would have driven if people drive themselves. So there's all kinds of new technologies coming in. There's a whole process that is ethical, that is technology related, that is regulatory related, is difficult to predict where the technology will end up and what it will do. That also speaks to should we not shy away from AI in general in the military? No, it's a permeating technology. It's everywhere. It's in your iPhone. It's in the social media apps you use. It's in your cars, as I said. So AI is like electricity, and saying the military can't use electricity is not the solution to any problem. The question is more, how do we make sure that we use that technology in a responsible way? And for some things, that is not that difficult. I mean, we use AI now for predictive maintenance on our aircraft. So that means that instead of replacing a screw just because it says so in the manual, you actually have more AI-validated data, which allows us to do much cheaper and much more timely maintenance on aircraft. We use AI to count Russian airplanes on airfields. There were 4 people doing that permanently, very bored people, I can tell you. And AI is helping us, and nobody gets killed. So it's only in the extreme use cases that AI would play a role in life or death, where we need to be really, really careful and stringent. And that's what we're trying to be. So we don't believe in, at the moment, giving decisions on life and death to AI in the battlefield within a NATO context. Fully agree on the healthcare, and as said by both of you, it's about educating our people. Are soldiers still going to be relevant? Very difficult to predict. If you would have asked me before the invasion in Ukraine whether tanks are still part of the modern battlefield, or whether people will still sit in trenches like they did in the First World War, I probably would have said no. But here we are, and we have a fully entrenched front line in Ukraine, which is a mix of World War I with trenches and grenades, and the future warfare with drones continually buzzing overhead and creating a whole new game. So it's difficult to predict what the future will look like, but for the time being, we see that soldiers and humans still play a key role in modern warfare. Nuclear weapons, I think it's a different category. I'll just say one sentence on it. As I said, the reason that nuclear weapons have such weight is because we all realize that a nuclear war never needs to be fought. That's what creates a deterrent. And I don't think we're at the same level when it comes down to something like AI, that we feel that there's something horrible going to happen. So I don't think the same power comes from AI at the moment as it does from nuclear weapons.
On that note, I want to thank you all for staying and for asking fantastic questions and for being a great audience. I would like to thank Studium Generale for hosting us and having us today. And I would like to thank our fantastic guests for being with us and for sharing their wisdom with us and answering all the questions. Thank you very much.